The American patrol saw him through the morning fog, a single figure walking down the center of the road, hands raised, a white cloth dangling from his right fist. German uniform, officer's insignia, no weapon visible. Sergeant Michael Brennan raised his fist, and his squad dropped into firing positions along the hedgerow. They had been advancing through this sector for 3 days, encountering German resistance that ranged from fanatical to non-existent. Some Wehrmacht units fought to the death. Some surrendered at first sight of American soldiers. There was no way to know which kind this officer was. "Hold your fire," Brennan ordered. "Let's see what he wants." The German officer continued walking. He was perhaps 40 years old, with gray at his temples and exhaustion written across his face. His uniform was muddy but intact. His boots were worn through at the heels. At 30 yards, Brennan stepped out with his Thompson pointed at the officer's chest. "That's far enough. What do you want?" The German stopped. His English was accented but clear. "I am Major Heinrich Weber, formerly of the 272nd Volksgrenadier Division. I am not here to surrender." Brennan's finger tightened on the trigger. Not surrender usually meant ambush. Usually meant something that ended with Americans dying. "Then why are you here?" "I am here to ask for your help." The words hung in the cold April air. A German major asking Americans for help. It violated every expectation that 3 years of war had established. Help with what? Weber lowered his hands slowly, carefully. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded map. "There is a tunnel 2 kilometers east of here. An old mining shaft. Inside that tunnel are 214 people. Women, children, elderly. They have been hiding there for 6 days. Brennan stared at the major. Hiding from what? From the SS. The final weeks of World War II had become a nightmare of competing horrors. As Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany, the Nazi regime's desperation had transformed into atrocity. SS units roamed behind collapsing front lines, executing civilians suspected of defeatism, shooting soldiers who attempted to surrender, burning villages that showed insufficient loyalty. Some German officers had tried to resist these orders. Some had been shot for their efforts. Major Weber had chosen a different path. "The people in that tunnel are from Halberstadt," Weber explained. 6 days ago, an SS detachment arrived and declared the village a fortress. All men between 14 and 60 were to be conscripted. Anyone who refused would be shot. And the civilians? The SS commander decided the women and children would remain in the combat zone as hostages. Weber's voice carried bitter intensity. "I disagreed with this decision." "What did you do?" "I gathered the civilians during the night and led them to the mining tunnel. My men provided cover while they disappeared. We told the SS that the civilians had fled on their own." Brennan lowered his Thompson slightly. This was either the most elaborate trap in warfare history or something he had never encountered. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because an SS unit is approaching from the east. They are searching for the civilians. My men have been delaying them, but we are running out of ammunition. In perhaps 2 hours they will reach the tunnel entrance." Weber stepped closer. "I have 80 soldiers who will fight to protect those people. But 80 men cannot stop what is coming. The SS detachment is battalion strength. They have armored vehicles. When they find the tunnel, they will seal it and leave everyone inside to die." The fog was beginning to lift. Somewhere east, Brennan could hear distant artillery. "Why should I believe you?" Weber nodded, as if he had expected the question. "You have no reason to believe me. I am your enemy. I have been your enemy for years. There is nothing I can say that will make you trust me." He gestured toward the east. "But those children in the tunnel do not know about enemies. They know only that they are frightened and hungry and waiting for someone to save them. I cannot save them alone." Brennan looked at his squad. 6 veterans who had learned that trust was usually fatal. They had been trained to kill Germans, not cooperate with them. Every instinct said this was a trap, but there was something in Weber's face that didn't match. The exhaustion, the desperation, the trembling hands holding the map. Brennan made his decision. "Show me where the tunnel is." The map revealed terrain that worked in their favor. The tunnel entrance was concealed in a small ravine, accessible only through a narrow approach that larger vehicles couldn't navigate. The SS would have to advance on foot. Brennan radioed his company commander. The response came back skeptical but supportive. If there were civilians in danger, command authorized assistance. Additional support would arrive within 3 hours. 3 hours might be too late. They reached the ravine in 40 minutes. What Brennan found there transformed his understanding of what Weber had accomplished. The tunnel entrance was guarded by approximately 80 German soldiers, exactly as Weber had described. They were dug into positions along the ravine walls, weapons pointed toward the eastern approach. But behind the soldiers, emerging from the darkness of the tunnel, were the faces that mattered. Children, dozens of them, peering out from the shadows with eyes that had seen too much. Women holding infants, elderly men who could barely stand. A girl who couldn't have been more than 7 stepped out of the tunnel and looked up at Brennan. "Are you going to help us?" Brennan had killed men. He had watched friends die. But nothing had prepared him for this simple question from a child asking if she would survive the day. "Yeah," he said, "we're going to help you." The defensive preparations began immediately. Weber's German soldiers and Brennan's American squad worked together, digging positions, establishing fields of fire. It was the strangest collaboration of the war. Men who had been enemies were now fighting side by side. The German soldiers spoke no English. The Americans spoke no German. They communicated through gestures, through the universal language of soldiers preparing for combat. The first SS scouts appeared at noon. They came cautiously, advancing through the tree line toward the ravine. What they found was a prepared defense that stopped them cold. The firefight lasted 20 minutes. The SS scouts retreated after losing 7 men. But they had accomplished reconnaissance. They knew where the tunnel was. They would return with more firepower. The waiting began. Weber moved among his soldiers, checking ammunition, adjusting positions. Whatever else the major might be, he was clearly a soldier who cared about his men. "Why did you do this?" Brennan asked during a quiet moment. "You could have followed orders." Weber stared at the tunnel entrance, at the faces of children watching from darkness. "I have a daughter. She is 12 years old. She is safe in Bavaria with my wife. When this war is over, I will have to look at her face and explain what I did." He turned to face Brennan. "If I had followed those orders, I could never look at her again." The main SS assault came at 1:30. They approached in company strength, approximately 120 men with armored support. The vehicles couldn't navigate the narrow ravine, but infantry came forward in waves. What they encountered was something unexpected. Germans and Americans fighting together. 2 enemies who had found something more important than their war. The first wave broke against combined defensive fire. The second wave penetrated halfway before being thrown back. The third wave stalled in the open, pinned by crossfire from multiple angles. The SS commander tried to flank. Weber had anticipated this. German soldiers on high ground caught the flanking force in ambush. By 2 o'clock, the attack had stalled completely. They had lost nearly 40 men. The defenders had suffered casualties. 3 German soldiers dead, 1 American wounded. But the tunnel remained secure. Then the reinforcements arrived. The rumble of American armor came from the west. Sherman tanks grinding through the forest, followed by a full infantry company. The SS commander saw the American force and ordered withdrawal. Brennan watched the SS soldiers disappear into the eastern woods. The relief washed over him in a wave that left him leaning against a tree. It was over. They had held. The civilians emerged slowly, blinking in afternoon light. Children who had been hiding for 6 days stepped into sunshine. Women wept with relief. Old men embraced the soldiers who had protected them, German and American, standing together where they had fought side by side. Major Heinrich Weber stood apart, watching his soldiers shake hands with Americans who had been enemies hours earlier. Brennan approached him. "What happens to you now?" Weber shrugged. "I will surrender. I will become a prisoner of war. Eventually, perhaps, I will go home to my daughter. You saved those people. We saved them. Together." Weber extended his hand. "Thank you, Sergeant, for trusting me when you had no reason to." Brennan took the hand. The grip was firm, the handshake of one soldier to another, transcending the uniforms they wore. Why did you trust me enough to ask? Weber looked at the children running through the ravine, laughing for the first time in days. Because in the end, we are both fathers. We are both sons. We are both human beings who know that some things matter more than war. The 214 civilians from Halberstadt survived the final days of World War II. They were evacuated to a displaced persons camp and eventually returned to rebuild their village. The mining tunnel became a local memorial, marked with a simple plaque telling the story of soldiers, German and American, who defended them. Major Heinrich Weber was held as a prisoner of war until 1946. He returned to Bavaria and reunited with his family. He never served in military capacity again. He became a school teacher, spending his career educating children about values that mattered more than ideology. Sergeant Michael Brennan received a Bronze Star for protecting civilian refugees. The citation did not mention that he had done so alongside German soldiers who had been his enemies that morning. Some stories from the war fit neatly into categories: good against evil, victory against defeat. The story of the tunnel doesn't fit those categories. It is a story about a moment when two men who should have been enemies recognized something more important than their war. A German major who refused orders that would have killed children. An American sergeant who trusted an enemy because the alternative was abandoning innocence. War creates monsters. Everyone knows this. But war also creates moments when ordinary people refuse to become monsters. When soldiers remember that uniforms do not define the humans they are. Major Weber had a daughter he needed to face. Sergeant Brennan had his own sense of what was right. And 214 people survived because two enemies chose humanity over hatred. The tunnel still exists, sealed now but marked with the memorial plaque. Visitors stop to read the story. They learn about German soldiers and American soldiers who fought together in the final chaotic days. And they learn that even in the worst of times, even when the world has gone mad, some people choose to be human. Not because anyone ordered them to, not because a manual told them to, because some things matter more than war. The German major walked toward American lines with a white cloth in his hand. He wasn't there to negotiate. He wasn't there to surrender. He was there to ask for help. And the Americans said yes. That choice, made on a foggy morning in April 1945, saved 214 lives. It proved that enemies can find common ground when innocent lives hang in the balance. It showed that courage and compassion can appear in the most unlikely people. 214 people went home after the war because two soldiers remembered they were human beings first and enemies second. Some stories are about weapons and tactics and combat. This one is about something simpler and more profound. It's about the moment when a sergeant looked at a German major and decided to trust him. It's about children who asked if someone would help them and heard the word yes. It's about humanity surviving even when humanity seems impossible. If this story of unexpected compassion hit you the way it hit me, smash that like button right now. Every like tells the algorithm that stories of humanity in chaos deserve to be remembered. If you're not subscribed, now is the time because we're uncovering another moment when enemies became allies in the most unexpected circumstances. Drop a comment and answer honestly. If a German officer approached you asking for help to save children, would you have trusted him or walked away? I want to know. I'll see you in the next one.